Hope you're having a great Wednesday so far. We're in the middle of the week, heading towards the weekend. I'm not sure if the weekend looks different than the weekday, but we still like to think about the weekend and get excited about it. But thank you for joining our panel today. Before we get started, a couple of quick housekeeping items. So attendees, please mute your line during today's session to reduce noise distractions. And there will be time at the end of today's session to ask the panelists questions, but you can enter questions in the chat now or during the session, and then at the end if you would like, and then we'll get to those at the end of our session. But as always, the CLDC is available as a resource for current students and alumni for career-related questions or concerns, and you can use Handshake to schedule an appointment with one of our career coaches. Please note we're currently offering appointments remotely, so using both phone or Microsoft Teams to connect for appointments, and we'll plan to do that for the foreseeable future. But we'll make updates once we're back in the office to meet one-on-one. But let's go ahead and get started. So resiliency is a topic that has grown in popularity over the last several years, but for many of us, it's still an obscure concept. And there's not one clear path to becoming resilient. So today we're excited to talk with 3 Ohio University alumni who will reflect on resiliency in their own lives. So my name is Aaron Sturgill. I'm the Associate Director for Employer Relations for the Career and Leadership Development Center, and I will be moderating today's panel. I would also like to introduce my colleague who will be moderating the chat.
Hi, all. My name is Dory Branch. I'm the Associate Director for the Bobcat Career Network within the Ohio University Alumni Association. And if you have any questions throughout, I will be in the chat answering your questions.
Thank you, Dory. So next, let's have the panelists introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask if you could share your name. If you could share your preferred pronouns, that would also be helpful. Mine are he, him, and his. The year you graduated from Ohio University, what you studied, and then what you do now. And just because she is one of my favorite former co-workers and students, Amani, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Sure thing. So hello, everyone. Thank you guys so much for the invitation. I miss my CLDC family all the time. So again, my name is Imani Edwards. My pronouns are she, hers, and hers. I actually graduated fairly recently in the fall of 2018 with a bachelor's in specialized studies looking at the Africana community with a minor in African American studies. And I think that's all you wanted, right?
And what you do now?
Yeah, and currently, so I just relocated from Ohio after graduation to the DMV area. I live right outside of DC, and I work on Capitol Hill for Congresswoman Marcia Fudge as her scheduler and office manager.
Thank you so much. Asleen, would you mind to go next?
Sure. I'm Asleen Rodriguez. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. At Ohio University, I studied political science with a minor in Spanish. These days, I am the Director of Government Affairs for the public transportation system in Columbus, known as CODA.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Natalie, would you mind to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Natalie Keller-Periano. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I live here in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm originally from Cleveland. I spent my time at Ohio University in my undergraduate work. I graduated in 2005 with a bachelor's in journalism and a minor in Spanish. And then I received my master's in education, also at Ohio University, where I graduated in 2007. And now I'm a full-time artist, educator, and writer, and have a brand called Natterdoodle here in Columbus and a little storefront here as well.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us today. We're going to go ahead and jump into our first question. So our first question is, how do you define resiliency? And can you provide an example of a time when you were resilient? And Natalie, would you mind to just stay on and answer that question first?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Brené Brown and her work on vulnerability and resiliency. And she defines resiliency as the ability to kind of have stick-to-itiveness to get through times of discomfort. And that doesn't mean not having emotions about it or feelings during it, because those kind of setbacks and challenges are jarring personally often, but the ability to just kind of keep that wherewithal and soldier on. I would say some of my most kind of the memorable moments for me around resiliency have to do with challenges around identity and work, or how other people perceive and interact with me around my identity. So I think I found the times I've had to be most resilient at work, especially having to be around times that there were gender norms or gender oppression in my workplace, in my previous employment. And now specifically, I think as we're in a time where a lot of people are experiencing discomfort during the quarantine, I also I'm an artist, so I use my hands full time, but I also have full body arthritis. And there are times where my body won't allow me to draw, and having to kind of grapple with that as a creative is really challenging. But I've found that I'm able to get through that through the support of relationships and community, and also through focusing my energy on joy, and joy as an act of resilience, and trying to kind of tap into those more joyful moments for myself to kind of get me through those more challenging times.
Thank you so much. Asleen?
So something that folks should know, Natalie is my best friend, and that we met at OU. And she's not just my best friend, she's a sister. And so I have watched my best friend be resilient during this pandemic. And it's not easy for a lot of people. And I'll tell you about what happened during that time for me. But I am so proud of my friend who has forged on building this beautiful branded business. So I just needed to say that, and just keeping her head up. So resiliency for me is a mixture of tenacity, fortitude, and grace, I think. It's not easy in the face of resiliency, you know, in a time when people struggle, to keep yourself motivated to go forward, and to do it with grace, like my favorite word. And sometimes it's not pretty, but I find that those are the times I grow the most. And there are times, sometimes I just want to forget. I think folks will say, you know, in those times where you have to be resilient, they really make or break you. And sure, to some extent. And sometimes you just want to be like, that's over. And I'm good with that being over. I've learned what I learned, and I need to move on from that. So that's what it means to me. In my life, I did teach for America. So I am Puerto Rican and grew up in Northeast Ohio, and grew up in a predominantly white community. And so going to OU was not a big change for me, but moving to the Bronx was a big change for me. In so many ways, people looked like me, but I didn't have the same lived experience as them. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, that was a tough time. I wasn't an educator. I did teach for America. I was a kindergarten teacher. I was resilient during that time, moving to a new city, and teaching students that when they walked in, didn't even recognize their name, having to hold back, tell a parent as a 23-year-old straight out of college student, telling a mom that their child needed to be held back was really tough. At the time, I would say it was the toughest thing I'd ever done. And making sure that I showed up every day for those kids was really important. So that was one time in my life, and I'm going to fast forward to current day. I started a social enterprise called Empower Bus. Our focus was in getting folks to and from their destination. So we were a microtransit company focused on low to moderate income communities. And at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of folks didn't want to put their employees in a vehicle because they couldn't social distance. So we lost about over $500,000 in contracts, and I had to make a really tough decision. Do we forge forward, or do we close the doors? And ultimately, I decided that I needed to close the doors. I was already at a breaking point. I was super stressed out. So I think part of that was a little bit of a relief. And the other part, I like to win. I pride myself on my success. And so there was heartbreak in the idea that I didn't get to see this business to where I wanted it to go. And I still needed to keep going. So now I'm the Director of Government Affairs at CODA, and it's an extension of the work that I did at EmpowerBus. But part of it was knowing that I have another day. And to Natalie's point, like, you get to choose joy a lot. In my life, I get to choose joy every day I wake up, and that's a choice for me. And so while it was tough and heartbreaking, I've decided that this is where I need to be, and I've come to a place of peace with that.
Thank you for sharing that. Amani?
No, yeah, that was great. Being on the panel with you too, it's been amazing just hearing your stories and your examples thus far. But I'm definitely agreeing with what you guys have defined with how you guys define resilience. And I think, Asleen, you kind of took my favorite word too, of grace. And so I think it's being resilient truly is being able to bounce back. But I think the key for me is bouncing back with grace and with kindness, because, anyone can make these adjustments and, do all these different things. But, how are you? Not only how are you feeling, how are you getting through, but how are you treating others, who you are kind of on that walk with or who you may cross your path with. So doing so with grace, doing so with kindness for me is definitely a key piece to just kind of being resilient and, remaining resilient. I think of two specific examples in my life. The first, when I was about, I would say 16, I had the opportunity to go to a private school from 4th to 10th grade. And so I was in a predominantly African-American community and moved to this private all-girls school. I'm too from Northeast Ohio, Warrensville Heights. So the school I went to was in Shaker. And I was, one of 3 Black girls, in the grade. And so, it wasn't a lot of folks who looked like me. And so just due to financial reasons, I ended up transferring back to public school. And so the dynamic of just race shifted completely. So I'm leaving a school where the entire school may have been 25% African-American, and I'm being very generous with that statistic, to going to a public school where now it's about 96% African-American. And so for me, even as an African-American woman, like having this sense of, who am I, and culture and identity and things of that nature. And so just being able to, be resilient through that transition at a young age was definitely something is an initial kind of memory that I have in regards to resiliency. And moving forward to today, looking at the resiliency in the workplace. And so again, I graduated in 2018, started working full time in the workforce in 2019. And so there wasn't really there was really no transition, no real kind of thinking period. I was just kind of flowing right into it. So being the youngest in my office and being in a position where I have to be kind of demanding and have people respect, me and my time and my demands for my boss. It was really interesting kind of navigating the inner office dynamic and working with other professionals, saying, hey, are you thinking that I may have been an intern or I may have just started? It's like, well, no, I'm a full-time professional. And so just trying to kind of rise above some of the preconceived notions that folks may have when looking and or when looking at me or thinking that I do. And so it's definitely just been interesting navigating the continued navigation of race in a predominantly white space, and then also again my age, and trying to just still be as professional as possible, but also demanding that respect from my other colleagues and other folks as well. So
thank you, Amani. I think Natalie's note about vulnerability was the theme of all of your responses. So thanks for being vulnerable and sharing those stories with everyone. So we'll move on to our second question. And Asleen, if you don't mind, we'll have you kick us off. But how does a person become resilient?
I think that's a great question. I think that a person becoming resilient really, in some cases, it's your lived experience, right? My lived experience is different than Natalie's, is different than Imani's. So part of it is your lived experience. The other part of it is that that again, I'm going to go back to Natalie, right? That you seek professionals who, like Brene Brown, are teaching you that. But then also, I think you just need to put it in practice. When you're in a situation, how do you temperature control yourself? I think is what I say to when I'm in a heated moment. Okay, how do I control what's going on inside me so that I can process? I'm a processor. What I feel and what I'm going through, so that, and again, my lived experience as a Latina is that I don't come off like an angry Latina or, whatever other stereotypes there are. So I think it's putting it in practice, understanding how people might perceive you, and knowing that you have the opportunity to change minds. So don't put yourself in your own box. Try to be in a place and space that when you come up against adversity, that you can survey yourself, survey the room, and then make a decision on how you want to proceed forward. I think some of the best leaders are tested, and you get to see who they really are when they are put to show how resilient they are. How do they show up for their people? It's easy when times are good, but when times are bad, that's when you get to see somebody's true character. And so I encourage folks that when you're in that situation, take a minute, assess the situation, assess how you feel and how you want to be perceived in that moment. And then you go forward.
Thank you. Imani?
Sure. I think, as you definitely hit the nail on the head, but I definitely think that for me to piggyback off of that, resilience is really birthed through a sense of inconvenience. It's birthed through adversity. And I think that something that my boss even talks a lot about now is this act of trial by fire. And so how are you, not only are you being put to the test, but how are you, kind of getting through on the other side? And so I think to really become resilient, some type of being uncomfortable, it has to happen. But again, navigating it in a way where you're not only learning about yourself, but learning about that task. But again, how are you coming out? How are you treating others during that process? And, are you maintaining that ounce of grace through the process? But also, are you being gracious? Like I said earlier, are you being gracious with yourself? Because I think a lot of times we get in these hard positions and, everything just kind of just seems so overwhelming, and you definitely just kind of lose sense of self. But I definitely think that to get back to it, I definitely think that becoming resilient definitely comes through, is ushered in through some type of adversity, some type of conflict. But again, just being able to get through on the other side with grace, stronger, than you kind of entered in the situation, definitely makes you the most resilient.
I'm going to steal that thing that you said, birth through inconvenience and adversity. That was really, that hit home. And I'm going to remember that. That's a really articulate way to talk about, becoming resilient. Natalie?
Yeah, I think the people who I know who are the most resilient are also the most emotionally curious. And so there are folks who have done work to kind of understand the deep spectrum of feelings that we have as human beings, both doing that self-work and having emotional intelligence around other folks' kind of emotional states and reactions. Because I think when you can pinpoint why things are impacting you, whether they be little things that irk you or big things like systemic oppression, when you can pinpoint why, you're better able to cope with and deal with those things. So even if I'm having a bad day, I think I've done a lot of that kind of work. So I'm normally able to say, this is why I'm feeling that way. It doesn't necessarily make the feeling go away, and that's not the point of it, but allows me to sit in it and also know that tomorrow will probably be better. I have a personal mantra, which is stay tender, stay tough, which is this concept for me of being really in touch with my emotions and being okay with being impacted by the world around me or the way folks treat me and others, but also having a grittiness to me to know that if someone were to do something that I found to be unjust or unfair, that I have the and the strength to be able to call that out and make change on that in the moment. So I think resilience really just comes from emotional intelligence and doing that your own self work and your work to understand the community and the world that you're a part of.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we're going to move on to our third question. And Imani, we're going to start with you. What has been your biggest failure and how did you deal with it?
Great question. So I fail all the time. No, I'm kidding. I think overall, when I look at a lot of the moments that I would see as a failure, it definitely kind of roots back to the lack of proper planning. And so for me, I think just certain semesters looking back, it's just like if I would have been a little bit more strategic with my agenda, or, if I would have, done some things different, I could have definitely had, a different outcome. And so for me, it's just been really just kind of being intentional about looking at the bigger picture, but then also being able to break it down so that things are just digestible. And so that, I avoid becoming so overwhelmed. Then I even think about moving here. Again, if I see something, I want to do something, I just kind of like do it. And I'll think about, the other steps later. So even making the decision to just uproot and just move out to DC right after graduation, I was just like, I probably should have saved a little bit better, done a little more research first. So again, I think that again, just kind of gets back to the planning piece. While I definitely encourage folks to kind of branch out, move away from home for a little bit. I definitely think that you can save yourself a lot of, heartache and, struggling and things of that nature if you just are intentional about planning properly. So for me, when I look at some of those failures or things I wish I could have done differently or better, it definitely all roots back to proper planning. I guess just kind of dealing with it again, just breaking it down, becoming more organized, and taking the big things and making them more digestible. Also just talking with different people who have been kind of where I've been and kind of latching on to different mentors and things of that nature, just talking to someone with a little more wisdom than I, and just kind of taking what they say, with a grain and seeing how it's applicable to my life. So my answer.
Thank you. Natalie? You're still on mute.
I'm sorry. I think someone else muted me because I'm loud and I giggle during Imani's response at her good answers. I can't really think of one big failure for myself, but I have a giant collection of small failures or medium-sized failures. And maybe I can't think of a big one because I think failure is just part of the process of being a human being. There's a leadership program that I went to at OU that's actually where I met Asleen, and it's called Leadership. And at Leadership, they teach this concept of seeing failures as this, like, how fascinating revelations rather than taking them on as like in giant setbacks. And so I think because I come from a design background, in design, you spend a lot of time drafting and sketching and making a million versions of something. So there's kind of this process of throwing out a lot of what you started with and getting comfortable with that. That's not to say that I'm comfortable with every failure I've ever had, especially when a failure that I've had negatively impacts someone else's experience or someone else's work. There was a time when I was the dean of students at a university, and I made a huge mistake. It was really a copy and paste mistake, but it was a copy and paste mistake that really ruined an important conversation. We were inviting students to basically a town hall to talk about inclusion on campus, and I missed a section of the alphabet in copying and pasting, and I omitted a large group of student leaders from really important organizations. And that was a huge setback, both in terms of just not having folks in the room who needed to be there and who I wanted to learn from and needed to be part of the conversation, but also in that I felt I made people feel excluded in a conversation around inclusion. So when I have a failure like that, I think the most important thing to do is to repair immediately, reflect on mistakes that I made and how it contributed to the failure, and then repair any relationships and give real apologies, heartfelt apologies, and attempt to not just say I'm sorry, but also figure out how to make it better, and what I can do to repair those relationships, because I think the relationships for me are the central part of that.
Thanks for sharing that. Asleen?
So I mentioned my biggest failure earlier, which was having to close down my business in April of this year. And in my office, though, I had a big oversized post-it note that says, sometimes your only available transportation is a leap of faith. And that was Margaret Shepard. And so, if money weren't an option, I think I'd be a risk taker all the time, just trying new things, failing all the time, right? And so sometimes it has to be calculated risks that you take, that you know that if you fail, you can sort of pick yourself up from. And I don't regret starting Empower Bus. I don't regret chasing a dream, quite literally, seeing it come to life, impacting people. We took homeless youth to work. We took formerly incarcerated men to work. We took hardworking, low middle class folks to work. We also did special events for some of our corporate partners here. And I did it with a lot of help, but like on my own. I'm not partnered. I'm second generation. My grandparents came from Puerto Rico with a second and third grade education. My dad is now retired bus mechanic. My mom was an inner city guidance counselor. No one in my family was an entrepreneur. But I had this itch and I had a desire to try. And one of my core values is curiosity. Sometimes that gets me in trouble, and sometimes it works out fantastic. And so it was heartbreaking. I'm not going to say that I didn't have to scrape myself up off the ground and that I didn't have to force myself to like take the covers from over my head. But I knew the way that I knew I was supposed to start Empower Bus is the way that I knew I'd be okay. And that happened. And that was really a great experience, even though it didn't work out. And Winston Churchill has a quote that I like too, which is, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And I think that that's really powerful. I think it's the courage to continue that counts.
That story gave me chills. Thank you for sharing that. Natalie, we'll have you start with our next question. How do you keep a positive attitude even in challenging situations, and how do you cope with pressure?
Yeah, I think positive attitude is something that I've had to work to formulate over time. what I find really appealing about positivity and optimism is it is actually a learned skill. And so, I think a lot of people think of me as a naturally bubbly person just because of the nature of the work that I make, very colorful, very vibrant. But actually, I spent a lot of time cultivating kind of a hopeful and optimistic mindset. So I think just doing that kind of work and reading, I really love to learn about this kind of, optimism, joy, resilience, these kinds of things. And so spending that time just reflecting on that. I journal a lot, which also helps me to get my feelings out and keeps me in a positive headspace. And making art keeps me really positive. I think above anything else, it's about relationships, though, and creating a network of people, both at work and in your personal life, who, for me, are able to help me hold up a mirror to myself when I feel like I'm not being my best self and reflect back to me what they see in me. I'm very, as Lane mentioned, that she's my very best friend, and she is. And both of us are entrepreneurs, so I'm very lucky that we can relate to each other in that way and kind of hold each other up. As long as only one of us is freaking out at once, it's good, right? And then I have networks of people in the creative community and just friends who are really, really supportive and are able to help me keep positive. So I think that's probably the most important thing for me. Was the thing I'm most proud of in my life is the relationships that I've built, because they have helped me to keep on the path that I want to be on and help to keep me positive.
Well, when I scroll through my Instagram feed and I see a Natterdoodle post, it gives me a little positive energy jolt. So I appreciate that positivity, and you'll see some love in the chat too from some other folks.
I saw that. Thank you so much for this comment.
Yeah. Asleen?
So for me, a foundation is my faith. So I put a lot of my love and trust in God, and know that the journey is not just my own in that way. So that's important to me, and that helps me stay positive. I echo Natalie, relationships are really important. I joke that I'm a collector of friends. Like, once you're my friend for life. And sometimes even Natalie's like, who is this person and who is this new friend? And I'm like, well, I met them, dropping off mail, and then we became friends. So part of it is surrounding yourself with people who share your passions, your viewpoints. So that's really important. And I recently started following this woman on Instagram. Her name is Tabitha Brown, and I am obsessed with what she says at the end of her videos, which is, go have yourself a good day. And even if you can't have a good day, don't go messing up anybody else's, because we're not always going to have a great day. And I love the idea that you don't have the right to bring somebody else down. And so that's been really important on the days as a leader, that when I'm not having a good day, I can't bring my team down, and or my coworkers at this point. And so I really lean on faith. I lean on my friends. And also, it's a choice. You get to choose joy. We're not in a completely oppressed society. And so I choose joy like 99% of the time. Even when I'm having a bad day, I still want joy in my life. And also, I'm lucky enough, I've been lucky enough to see a new day. And a new day allows you to have a new attitude.
I also follow Tabitha, and I love that at the end of the videos. That's what I hope that I'm doing also. There's also some people are agreeing with us in the chat also.
Yes. And she also says, like, because that's your business. So, like, if you want extra ketchup on whatever, add it, because that's your business. Like, I love her.
Yeah, I love that too. Thank you. Imani?
Love me some Tabitha Brown, and that is my business. No, but you guys definitely just took everything that I was going to say. So just real briefly, just echoing the things that I just wrote down was first and foremost prayer. I too am just very invested in, just my spiritual life. And so just being able to kind of find that strength from someone not here on, in this word, is super important to me. It's been super important just for my own journey, especially coming out here. The next thing that I had was communal and relationship building. And that's also super, super important to having a positive attitude and just to continue from that, just accountability, like an accountability partner. And so outside of just having these relationships, like who's going to keep you, accountable for making sure that, you're okay, and that, that you're not necessarily, ruining your day when you don't have to. And then the last thing I had was just intentional positive self-talk. And just, I realized that, kind of going back, spiritual power is in the tongue. And so you can literally speak life or, speak death. You can speak negativity, you can speak joy. And so I think just catching myself when I'm like, oh, I'm not good enough for this, or, this isn't, blah, 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 being negative, just catching myself and just being really intentional with countering that with something positive. And something that I actually posted this morning, I just thought about that I think is in theme. It says, hate has 4 letters, so does love. Lying has 5 letters, so does truth. Negative has 8 letters, so does positive. Cry has 3 letters, so does joy. Hurt has 4 letters, so is heal. So again, you can transform. You have the power to transform every negative thought into a positive one. It's just, how intentional are you being with that? And that's what I will say to that.
Thank you. We appreciate you sharing that. All right, so we're at our last question, and Asleen, if you don't mind to be the first to answer, it's any other words of encouragement that you would like to share with your fellow Bobcats?
Sure. I think the journey of life, and I'm 36, so I'm removed from my time at OU. You're going to have peaks and valleys. You're going to question yourself along the way. Should I be doing this? What am I good enough? You encounter that. And I just encourage you to remind yourself that you are worthy, that you are probably stronger and braver than you think, that there are people rooting for you when you don't even know they're rooting for you. And I encourage you to build a network of people who are going to support you. Part of the reason I was able to land so softly after the closure of Empower Bus is that I'd done a really great job of networking and finding folks that were going to be my champion when I wasn't in the room. And I guess I'll also leave you with this. We have one life on this planet, and I encourage you to truly make the most of it. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't include a full day of Netflix, right? But it does mean that when you have the opportunity to try something new that you're curious about, say yes to it, even if you don't know what the outcome of it is going to be, because you might be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you. That's some great advice and some great words to pass on to the Bobcats listening and the ones that'll get this message later. Amani?
Yeah, sure. So I'm just piggybacking off what Asleen just said. Again, sky's the limit. Just try anyway. The worst you can do is just not like it and not do it again. The worst you could get is, a no. And so that just means that there's just another opportunity out there that is for you. When I was job searching out here in DC, a guy I was working with, he said, all you need is one yes. And so, you'll get all these no's, but, that just don't let that stop you, because that one yes is all you need. So just just really, again, just have the guts to keep showing up and to keep going. The other thing that I will say is just, particularly to Bobcats, is just to use your resources, a slight CLDC plug, but, there are folks out here who like literally want to help you succeed. Go get your resume looked over, go to these like different trainings and sessions, because they really will prepare you to be, even greater. It's awesome to be able to bounce different ideas off of different folks who come from different backgrounds, who think differently, or who are trained to think a certain way, or trained to, help you in a very specific field. So, at Athens, there's definitely so many different resources that you can really tap into that will not only help build your network, but also just help build, I think, you as a person. And again, that will equip you to become more resilient. Again, in the theme, become more resilient if and when you're faced with some adverse situations. And again, I think Bobcats particularly, they want to see you win. They want to see the best for you. And so I think just taking that and using that to your advantage will only help you out in the long run. So again, just go for it. Just do it. People are here. Resources are here to help you, and definitely just take advantage of that to just be the best person that you can be.
Thank you so much for that plug. We appreciate it. Natalie?
Yeah, I would say when I was in college, I was very goal oriented. I still am, but I had like a vision in my head of exactly how I wanted my career to go. And I was very adamant that was going to be my path. And the one thing that I wish someone had told me, or maybe someone did tell me and I didn't listen, I don't remember, is that a lot of things, you're going to fall in love with a lot of different things in your life, and that you can experience that in real time and react to it. So I now believe that it's great to have a big dream, and it's also okay to pay attention to the infinite little tugs you'll experience on your heart throughout your lifetime, and to react to those like a choose your own adventure story, because there is no one right way to do your life or your career. I thought I was going to write for Rolling Stone. I did journalism for a minute and I was like, no, thank you. I'd like to do education. I went into education, had an awesome career, hit the goal position that I wanted to be in, and then decided I wanted to do my art full time and see if I could make it happen. So all of those jumps feel like all over the place, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm grateful that I had folks in my corner to cheer me on to make those kind of leaps. I probably would not have been an entrepreneur if I'd not watched my best friend be able to do it. And the other thing I will say is, along that idea of being so goal oriented, we are, I think, as a country in America, we're very settled on this kind of idea of constant advancement and progression, and always kind of being on the way to pursuing happiness. And I would just advise to not forget on your pursuit of those things, to enjoy that journey, and to, especially if you're on your way to like, I'll be even better when I lose 10 pounds, or I'll be even better when I get this job that I want. Don't forget to love this version of you right now, and not just the one that you're on your way to, because the moon is still the moon in all of its phases, and you are still you in all of your phases. So just give yourself grace over this time of constant development, and embrace that perfectly imperfect, and keep your eyes open to those opportunities along the way.
Well, thank you, all three of you, for those words of encouragement for our fellow Bobcats. I'm sure the ones listening are taking note of those things. I know that I did, so thanks for sharing that. So we do want to go ahead and open up for some questions from the audience with the time that we do have. So if you do have a question, please share that in the chat. And while we wait for those questions to come in, Dory, would you mind to briefly talk about the Bobcat Network?
Absolutely. So just really quickly, I know that all of our panelists today really talked about the network and utilizing their network of support. And I think it's really important as Bobcats that we build that support for one another. So the CLDC and the Alumni Association have partnered together to build the Bobcat Network. I know people always kind of talk about the Bobcat Network as this obscure thing to tap into, and now you actually can. So it is a partnership between the two offices where you can connect with people one-on-one. You can kind of peruse by whatever your interests are, whether it's career related, affinity related, location related. And we're continuing to build that site out more and more to kind of help support our Bobcats, make those connections with fellow alumni, with students to make connections with alumni. So it's just ever growing and changing, and we'd love to have all of you on that network. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat. But for those of you who might not have access to that, it is bobcatnetwork.ohio.edu. It's very simple, and we hope to see you all on there.
Thank you, Dory. It was like a commercial break. I appreciate that. All right. Well, one thing I do see in the chat here is Kim Jeffers, who is a great colleague, but also is an advisor and an internship coordinator for our Bachelor's of Specialized Studies program. Wanted to just share thank you so much. It's been a great inspirational and motivational panel. You're also well-spoken and have such wonderful perspectives and outlooks on life. Moni, it looks like she wants to connect with you since you are a BSS alum. So if you want to connect with Kim, I'd be happy to connect the two of you. Jody also shared that she really needed to hear what you said today, Natalie. So thanks for sharing that. All right, well, while we wait to see if questions come in, I'm curious to know, we kind of touched on career a little bit because I think career is a part of our life. It's not just our personal life, our professional life, it's all of our life together, and resiliency certainly plays a part in our careers. I'm curious to know if you have any, really maybe even any career advice for anyone who might be listening. I know that the topic isn't necessarily about career, but certainly impacts that for sure. And we know right now many students have had offers rescinded because of COVID-19. Internships have been canceled. And they're faced with some challenges of figuring out, what do I do now? I'm curious if you have any advice or words of wisdom to share with them, and any of you can feel free to unmute and share.
I guess I can jump in real quick. So I know as many folks that are not hiring right now, to kind of keep the faith and be persistent, because there are definitely still places that are hiring for full-time positions. I think going back to Asleen's point earlier, what's your network looking like? Who can you tap into to say, hey, I'm about to graduate or I just graduated, looking for a job. Can I send you my resume? And can you kind of shoot it out? If you have any opportunities, let me know. So definitely just kind of keep the faith. There are still places hiring. Definitely kind of focus in on your network. And for those who are juniors or seniors, start early. I think my younger sister, actually, she started I want to say like in August, September of her senior year, and actually got an offer like in November, December. And so right before the pandemic hit, she, luckily started early enough, already had that offer. They did not, thankfully, rescind it. So, just kind of being intentional about starting early, being proactive in your job search, because again, you never know what can happen. And so it's just better to just be as proactive as you can, but definitely just grind it out like crazy, because there's definitely still some places who are still onboarding and hiring during this time as well.
So on this panel, I think I've probably had the most career changes of anyone. I've gone from education to nonprofit to government to entrepreneurship, and so I have not been afraid to take risks, but along the way, what has allowed me to do that has been networking. Again, sort of knowing what I said about my upbringing. My parents couldn't call anybody in Columbus to open a door for me. So what I did was I showed up. I showed up to the happy hour that was a professional networking happy hour. I reached out to folks on LinkedIn. And maybe if you are somebody, I'm an extrovert all day, right? But if you're an introvert and happy hours aren't your thing or social settings aren't your thing, try LinkedIn. Now that we're in this virtual world, can we do a WebEx or a Zoom? Even if you're in a place and space where you're feeling challenged to find a job, you should be putting yourself out there to connect with folks. To Amani's point earlier, the worst somebody can tell you is no. And to me, I always think no is not now. I'm like, I'll be back. Don't worry, I'll be back, right? So I encourage you truly to utilize technology, to find places and spaces where you feel like, okay, I feel comfortable doing this. Young alumni networks that are within your city, if there are nonprofits that have professional development programs, go after them. Even if you don't think you're qualified, or even if you don't know anybody there. Again, you don't know unless you try. I like sometimes, very, very rarely do I play the lottery, but like when it's like $1 gajillion, I'm like, I'm playing because somebody has to win, and that somebody might be me. But if I don't play, I'm definitely not winning that lottery, right? And I kind of view it the same way. I believe that you aren't going to get what you want unless you speak up. You have a voice. Your voice is powerful. It's needed in spaces, especially if you are some sort of other, it is needed. And I just really encourage you to think about what's next, even if you don't know what's next. So just meet with folks. If you want to change your career, what skills do you have that you think are transferable? And if you don't feel like you have skills that are transferable, how can you talk to the person who has the job you want? Because I bet you the job you want wasn't a straight line for them either. They might have done HR and now they're in procurement. They might have done, they might have been a lawyer and now they are, in learning and development. You really should get to know people and understand their journey, because it might teach you that, wow, it's not a straight line, because it isn't.
I agree with Imani and Asleen. And I would say if you're in an idle time right now, create your own opportunity, find a cause that you care about, and write to that organization, that nonprofit, that activism group, and say, here are the skills that I have. What can I do for you? And even if you're doing it remotely, what can I do from home? So there's something that you care about. If it's the Black Lives Matter movement, if it's the Humane Society, figure out what you have to offer. And that is building your resume and also building up your soul, right? Doing something that you care about. So create an opportunity for yourself. So if you've got design skills, offer that. If you've got research skills, offer those. And if by research skills, I mean, if you can Google really well, like you can do projects for nonprofits. I had so many volunteer roles when I was in college just because I was passionate about so many things. And I just did little communications PR projects for folks, and they found it useful, and it was also useful to me. So if you can invent it for yourself, I think that's huge. And that keeps your mind active and your hands from being idle, and shows that you didn't let time that was idle keep you idle. You still were engaging, you were still creating, you were going after it.
Thank you so much for that advice. There's some great points there for our current students to think about, or even our alum who are in this kind of job search place because of the pandemic. So thanks for sharing those points. Dory, you have anything that you want to add before we close the panel today?
Just really quickly, I put it in the chat, but again, for those who don't have access, this recording will be available on the Bobcat Network. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for coming and speaking today. I knew that you all could talk about resiliency. That's why you were asked here, but this has been so helpful and educational, even to someone who considers themselves to have done research around resiliency. So I appreciate all of your insights. And I think kind of what Erin said at the beginning, you know, we recognize there isn't a straight path to resiliency, and everyone experiences it in different ways. And I just appreciate all of your vulnerability and willingness to share those experiences with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. Just want to thank all three of you for your time today and the advice that you shared. Again, the session is recording currently and will be available on the Bobcat Network. So really appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day and an awesome week. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the chat, I think there's definitely some love for you all in the chat. So if you want to take a look before we jump off, but thank you so much for your time. And hopefully I'll have an opportunity to connect with you all in person sometime and not just virtually. And it was great meeting all three of you.
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great, guys. Thank you.